Hello, this is Jason Tenczar, and I'm going to walk you through my open source contribution to the project OMR Checker. Quick background is that OMR Checker is an open source tool that's written in Python that can process exams, surveys, and forms by reading marked bubbles. It's used in like different competitions and classrooms, and it's known for having really good accuracy with scanned documents. And so the project is very developer focused, which is very nice. It makes it very easy to contribute and so that people can plug in their own workflows or add features pretty easily, which made it a perfect thing to contribute to. And so I mainly worked on a CLI entry point for OMR checker here. And that just lives in the entry.py folder, so it's very easy to handle because the file names are very intuitive and it was very easy to find exactly where I needed to edit. But before the program required that you put your files in a very specific directory with a very specific name, and it didn't really have support for you to add custom locations. And so that was pretty limiting, especially for people that use this like a power user. And so I added three new main arguments as outlined in this issue here. I added the template file argument, the evaluation file argument, and the config file argument. And you can see this in the argparse section of the code where I just added those flags over here. And so here's mainly what I actually changed. I obviously updated the argparse arguments because we need to have more arguments added in. Those will also show up in the help tab if you ask for help. I'm very familiar with the argparse library. I've used it a lot in the past, and so this was a very easy contribution to make. I also updated the file loading logic inside of entry.py. And so really what the new logic does is it checks if the user passes in a custom path through like new arguments. If the new file exists, then we're going to load that. If not, then it falls back to the old directory-based method. If the file is missing completely, it will just let you know, hey, this file is missing, which makes it very clear for users to use. I also updated the table rows that show detected paths. So if you pass in a custom file, the output now actually reflects that. So that was just a little edge case that I thought of. So let me kind of demonstrate how this works. So here's some commands I do for Showcase. This is what it does on default. No, hold on. Okay, so I'm going to pull over the window that popped up on my screen. Here is a Scantron. It has the black outline and little boxes representing where each one of the letters are. However, I don't really like seeing that when I first open, but lucky for me, I can pass on a config file pretty easily. So here we have, when I hit Q, this just shows the next slide of what OMR checker does. And so, yeah, I want to see this right away. I don't want to have to go through that black box and hit Q on it in order to show the next tab. So I pass in a custom config file using this command right here. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and run that. And there we go. It just shows up right away. So that just shows that the argument's being passed in and it's actually able to recognize that that is our config file. See, it says, there we go. There's our config file that we're reading from. That's the custom path that we passed in. So everything's working as intended. These are also two commands that should fail because this config is invalid. So it's just going to throw an exception. And then this is also just non-existent, this config file. So this is just not going to run. Yep. File not found, non-existent. So their error handling's there. And so as I reflect on what I did, I really liked how the open source project had really good labels. So the issues were labeled really well. And I also really liked that they enforced a good coding style. I'm very familiar with PEP 8, the Python style, and so all of the code here was in PEP 8, which was awesome. So I didn't have to change that up. What was a little trickier was handling the file path edge cases. So if a user passed in a file path that didn't exist, or if it had like Unicode characters in the name, it would cause errors and I would have to add checks like in exceptions to make sure that the program handles that gracefully and it doesn't just straight up crash. Um, I also learned that even small features need a very thoughtful end-to-end analysis when it comes to user experience. Um, you need to think about the user experience from the start, from the end of the software development life cycle, and just contributing to this project helped me realize that because if you don't really understand what you're contributing to, you're not going to be able to contribute effectively. You also need to add very good error handling because a missing config file is not a bug. It's just a frustration for someone who may not know what they're doing. And so what I would do in the future is I'd probably add unit tests. That would help me catch edge cases a little easier and be a little more creative on what could go wrong. So I think that's something that I need to do in the future. So mainly to summarize, my contribution was to add CLI arguments for the config files and OMR checker. I pretty much just made the tool more flexible and beginner friendly. I updated the arg parse, I changed the file loading logic, added a little bit of error handling, not as much as I should have, and I improved the display so that users can see exactly what file paths are being used when you pass in custom config files. So yeah, thank you so much. This is a very fun project, and now I have some open source contribution under my belt. Thank you.